Welcome to Brands on Tap, the podcast where we discuss all things brand related.
So whether you're a business owner, industry expert, or simply interested, this podcast is for you.
Hi guys, and welcome to this week's podcast. We're going to be covering marketing consent in 2025. So everything that you need to know, the important things that you need to know about marketing consent.
Yeah, only the important stuff.
Yeah, not everything, because it is quite comprehensive. So just what we feel is the most fundamental things to cover. So we're going to go over, digital, offline, general marketing, so consent in marketing, and what that might entail, and just how that's changed really over the past sort of 5-10 years, and what's expected of businesses, and what we need to do now to kind of tick that consent box really.
Yep, I think that covers it pretty well.
Good.
I mean, I guess then we can start with, what is marketing consent and why is it so important really?
Yeah, that's a good place to start, I think.
The beginning, yeah.
So holistically, marketing consent is basically making sure that you're complicitly or compliant with your customer base and people that are engaging with your brand. So basically anybody that, any touch point from a website, from offline, from somebody you might talk to and then try and upsell something to a customer, depending on the level of the brand and the way you're engaging with that person, it's protecting them and making sure that certainly today in 2025 more than ever, certainly very important thing to make sure that you're protecting them against using their information, their data, and what you're communicating to them with.
Basically informing them of what you're doing essentially and how you're using their data. Yeah,
in a nutshell. Yeah, you're basically wanting to make sure that, so say as an example, if we go back pre-2018, before GDPR came in, before people were that aware of consent.
Yeah, I feel like now it's more of a thing. People are so afraid of how their data's used.
Yeah, it's almost now gone the other way, where people are so paranoid and so confused, and it's become quite a hot topic.
Absolutely.
That I think before 2018, people were just living naivety. Some people were a little bit concerned about things, but they weren't really fueled enough to know why they'd be concerned, or have enough kind of information out there about who was taking their information, how it's being used, etc., to really warrant that worry. So I think once GDPR came in 2018, that kind of put the fear of God into a lot of people, and they thought, oh, people are using my information in ways I had no idea. And I think that's probably where we've come from. That's where that stemmed from. And then, just to be clear, we've got the differentiators between UK, EU, and US, and the rest of the world in terms of how each country determines, or what each country determines is fair policy in terms of how you treat people.
Yeah, and obviously for us now it's changed post-Brexit, or is changing. I mean, it's always changing. That's the other thing.
It is always changing. But yeah, you're right. Post-Brexit, things got a little bit tighter, and I think there was a lot of uncertainty, and the UK already had its own way of managing data against, say, how the EU did it and how America does it. So it was already quite a strict set of rules and things that we had to adhere to that pre-Brexit were already in place. So I think since then it's just exacerbated and it's gone, and kind of now it's, like I say, in 2025, now it's more important than ever to make sure that we're on top of everything for ourselves and for our clients. So it's that shift, I suppose, is what we're getting at from implied consent, where pre-2018 you could get away with a lot. So on a website, if you were asking someone to sign up to a newsletter, if there was any reference to cookies, if there was a marketing campaign you wanted to run, if you were running something on social media, whatever it might have been,
you might have free for all.
Yeah, or even offline. I mean, it's less offline, but getting somebody to sign up to a newsletter, used to be able to just write an email address in, and you could just fire away and start bombarding them with messaging, sales messaging, collateral, newsletters, you name it. You could keep firing at them, and I think that got out of hand, and certainly some of the larger, bigger corporations were abusing that, so something had to stop. And I think that 2018 mark was the point of which that kind of the world was trying to say, okay, now we need to, before this goes any further, we need to stop this
Yeah, completely.
snowballing out of control, this kind of lack of understanding of how data works, and put something in place to try and regulate it. So for me, that's where that's happened. It's basically all about informed consent, I suppose. If we had to talk about the difference between what it was like pre-2018 and now 2025, it's that focus on making sure everything's informed. So you wouldn't market to somebody with assumptions, basically. And on top of that, we've now got sort of social media platforms, and we've got remarketing, and we've got ads, all that kind of coming into play and being affected by this knock-on effect of...
Yeah, because there are so many limitations now to what you can and can't do.
Yeah.
I mean, and yeah, in terms of remarketing, we'll come on to it later anyway, but if you're not able to track someone's website behaviour or even visit, then you can't remarket to them unless you're only doing it through a pixel. So
yeah, it makes it very challenging for marketers in particular to sort of say,
completely.
you know, this is your data, and be very confident with it, because you've gone from essentially having lots of cookies being allowed, third-party cookies, which are now kind of being completely phased out as of 2025. And you need to use, you know, systems like GA4, which again, questionable for us because the reliability of it and the data. I know you and Jazz have.
We take it with a pinch of salt, I think, what GA4 tells us. And I mean, for some clients, we have that running like concurrently with cookie-free analytics, and the disparity between the two is huge. Like sometimes it's like a reduction in 50% of conversions based on GA4. So like you've got a really limited view. But then, and I mean, sorry, go on.
So what's the go-to for you and Jazz now for tracking?
Plausible. That's what we're recommending anyway at the moment. So yeah, that's a cookie-free analytics system, and it only tracks that URL. Yeah. So yeah, they're not basically following your web presence as a user anyway. They're just tracking what you do on site. They have, I think that is the other thing I kind of said to you earlier. There's that fear that people have that like, oh, they know what I'm doing online. They can see what you've done, what you've clicked, but they don't know who you are. Like I feel like people have that fear of what their web presence does or who it's telling information to, and it's not. I don't think it's, in my opinion, as scary as people kind of make it out to be or feel that it is.
No, I can understand, but there's different generations of people engaging with these things, and I can understand from the media and what's put out there and the fear mongering. Yeah, people can become very unsure, given that before 2018, even they didn't even know half the things that were being used. They didn't even understand how their data was being used to remarket to them or to upsell to them or to send them newsletters or emails. And I think it's probably stems from that and that uncertainty to kind of now still in the back of their mind thinking, but how much of my data is being used and who has access to it and do you share it? And I think that's where this focus on what we're trying to communicate, I suppose, in this podcast, and where 2025 is saying, let's draw the line and move on from here, is that let's just put that as an absolute priority to tell anyone that's engaging with our brand exactly how we're using the data, give them the ability to opt in and out, because no one wants to see ads. Which actually
is for benefit, like we were saying, yeah,
it can be very beneficial, can't it? Because no one wants to see ads for things that they
genuinely don't care about,
and the people running the ads are paying to show them ads that if they're very skeptical about them in the first place, and I know a lot of people that are, and they'll say, I'm not using this platform, it's got ads, and you know, I don't want to go on social media where it's all ads. And I think if there's that real negativity around ads, and the ads are then not relevant to you, there's a huge disconnect there between that want to engage.
Yeah, so giving a user the option to opt out, it's only going to benefit you and shorten your list essentially of people that are disengaged anyway and aren't interested.
I think so, yeah. I think it's only going to be a positive thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but part of me also thinks, are there those people that see, they're going to market to me, they're going to display me, like show me ads. I don't want that clogging up my feed, even though it is something I'm interested in. I'd rather look at my own leisure than be marketed to.
There will be that many. There will be a proportion of people doing that for sure.
I think that's probably quite a typical thought process.
It is. But I suppose that goes deeper into the psychology of how people engage with ads, and you'd have to look into that in terms of, which I think would be really interesting for us to do, and we could probably touch on that in another podcast actually. But you know, the psychology of how people are engaging today. Yeah. Say, because we can't assume people engage now the same way with ads as they did, say, on a TV ad or a cinema ad where you're sat in a different environment, you're seeing it in a different context. Now everyone's obsessed with, you know, phones and quick motion and moving and coming in and out. I think seeing ads at a rapid rate, I certainly know, even from conversations I have, it's a very common touch point for people to say to me, oh, this has got ads or that's got ads, or I don't use this because of ads. There's that very negative stigma, whereas I think the only way to solve that is to kind of say to people, all right, well, let's see what ads you do want to see. If you don't want to see any, we'll look at trying to reduce them. But at the same time, I can't see a platform fully removing ads unless, let's use Netflix, Amazon, for examples, unless the subscription model is higher, or that user
pays
is
for the ads itself.
Exactly. The user's going to have to pay for the ads at some point. So I guess there's going to be, it's a fair policy about being transparent, saying, look, like Netflix does, look, we can reduce the rate of your monthly cost.
Which they did. They put everyone on that plan initially, didn't they? Onto the ad plan, and then you opted out of the ad plan.
Yes.
Am I right? Yeah.
Some people, I think I was already on the higher tier, but you're right.
Yeah, so I was on like the basic student plan or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
And then it just automatically opted me into ads. But then I don't know what I'm on now. I don't remember seeing any ads recently.
I think they're not the worst. There's some that are like,
No, I feel like you can get through a whole episode on Netflix and not see any ads.
I think you can. I think they're quite generous with it, but I think there's some tedious platforms. You've got sort of the more ITVs, Channel 4, where you've got to sit through a whole...
Channel 4 is so bad. Or like 4OD, like the app.
Yeah,
oh my God, I've seen the same ad about... It's the voiceover that sounds like Bryn from Gavin and Stacey about the money saving pots.
Yes, I know the one you mean.
Yeah, and it's like her time jumping
Bryn,
and neglecting the fact she's got a child in the background.
Yeah.
Like the coffee machine. If you know, you know. But
yeah, I know what you mean.
I've seen it
I think
too
that's
many
the
times.
trouble. And then you go to the point of irritating someone, and then that ad just becomes an irritant, not in no way effective.
It's almost like overexposure. Like I'm completely overexposed to that ad now. I'm completely over it. I don't want to see it again.
No.
Like, it's annoying.
It's really interesting. Like I say, I would be interested in looking into the psychology of how people engage. Because like you said, I mean, if you give someone the choice, they're probably going to say, no, I'd rather just have an ad-free experience on my social media. I'd rather watch Netflix ad-free. But I guess the trade-off is them saying, well, look, we can give you a reasonable, relevant selection of ads, and we'll reduce the rate of your costs. So over the year, you're saving... £80-100 on subscriptions, which is significant for somebody, but the trade-off is you're going to have to watch a couple of ads that are relevant. But people know what's going on, they know what ads are being served, they know what date. So I think there's that transparency, which is very different to how ads used to be served, where it was like, let's try and get someone's attention. I think we just have to face facts that today's world, people, like you said, people are a lot more skeptical, a lot more aware, and a lot more reluctant to give information and give data. So if we've seen it, haven't we, with newsletters and sign-ups. If you put a newsletter at the bottom of your website, it's quite far down. So
true. Even like naturally, it's the hierarchy's not helping it
does
anyway.
portray somebody to think, I don't really think that's worth bothering. And if you can't even be bothered to write what the newsletter is going to give that person back, what reward they're going to get, then they're going to think, well, it's just a newsletter. If there's some incentive for them there,
10% off on your first order,
10% on your first order, or some insights that you won't get anywhere else, or a personal, blog that we write ourselves that we share with you.
Exclusive content. It's how you portray that, isn't
it? Something worthwhile, because otherwise you're saying to them, let's have your data, and that person is then, like you said, is not fully aware of what's going to be done with it. And I think that's what needs to be crystal clear, is also underneath, by law we need to be doing that now. That's the point of this podcast. But I mean, being blunt and trying to put it in a layman's sense, that's what needs to be done. Is, look, we're going to use your data for the following things. We want this because we want to educate you, we want to keep you in the loop, and hopefully you might like
spin
something
it as a benefit.
Exactly. So I think it's non-deceptive is what we're trying to communicate. Everything needs to be transparent. Everything's clear. And obviously, like you said, so touching on, I'm aware of, obviously, Plausible. I've installed it on quite a few client sites now. The benefit of that is obviously you're putting phrases in the website without going technical about it. And those phrases are then triggering responses in the tracking. So we can see what people are doing. We can track the behaviour. But unfortunately, still at the moment, until we can come up with they can come up with a replacement for third-party cookies, we are still reluctantly going to lose some information there.
I mean, the other thing with Plausible, currently, today, it only allows button click tracking. So you can only set custom events for button clicks, so no form submit, etc. So you can obviously track that form submit button, but you're not able to tell if it's successfully going through. So things like that are blurring your vision as well.
Exactly. That comes with cookieless
Yeah, but then
tracking.
saying that it might progress. I don't know how that'll
It's going to
work.
have to, I think, but it's not. I think it's important to stress it's not the software, so it's not like, oh, we're using plausible and it's limited. It's more the fact that it's the way that GDPR and the way that consent is going that's creating the limitation. So Google Analytics 4, GA4, that's going to have the same issue. Where if we want server-side tracking from it and we want cookieless tracking, we're going to be limited to having whatever it can produce for us. So for yourself and Jazz as marketing people, and for marketing reports for clients, obviously those reports are going to have to reflect the information that you can get. But
which is already blurred, really.
It's already very blurred, exactly.
Yeah, from me and Jazz were talking about it the other day. The increase now of people obviously opting out of cookies when they land on site is growing. That knowledge of people not wanting to accept, especially on sort of more sensitive subject websites, without getting into it, like service specific ones. We've noticed now, like, we've got ads running. So we see the clicks that are going through Google Ads, so the traffic landing on the page, but then we lose them at that point of when they decline, and then we have no idea what we're doing, but we know like that they're referring. We know that it's working, but GA4 is just not telling us that half the time. But we have noticed though that it's the younger generations that are declining. Like that 18
makes perfect sense, right? I mean, they've been brought up in an era where people are so
hide your data,
they've been educated on these platforms that are asking for this information, or they're so immersed with websites and they know how web data works and social media data, and they're going to be very aware that actually, no, I don't want you having that information about me. I don't want to see an ad for this, or I don't want you to remarket me for that. But again, I think the transparency of that could still be much better, because I think if it comes across, like we said earlier, with the newsletter, if it comes across from the organization, the business, the system, the platform, that they're trying to be honest with that person, and they're saying, look, this is what we want your data for, and this is what we want to send you, and this is the reason we want to do it. Are you okay with that? I feel like those cookie banners, which soon will probably become very different, because once cookies start fizzing off, the banner will be saying more about, are you okay with this sort of technology or that sort of technology?
It's going to be
that goes,
far more opt-in boxes than it already is.
It is.
The way I see it.
It is, but I think it's giving somebody the reasoning and the benefits, right? Rather than straight away you hit it and it says, these are the options you can have. These are all the things you want to take off you. These are all the tick boxes that you can untick and tick.
And
do you want us
no
to take
explanation.
All these? Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you want us to tick all these things? Do you want us to market to you? Do you want the essential? Well, a lot of people don't understand why they'd want essential cookies, so you wouldn't even make them optional. Because usually the essential cookies are to drive the functionality of the website. So
and sometimes if you opt out of that, you can't even see the site.
Exactly. So you're actually hampering your own experience at the worry that you don't really understand what the essential cookies are used for. So again, if you give someone the option to tick it off, you probably would, because you think, well, no, I don't want you to have that if I don't have to.
I think it just comes back to that lack of education on what cookies were, or and what they're turning into.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I wouldn't, before working in marketing, I wouldn't know what essential cookies were versus marketing cookies and all the other tick boxes.
Exactly.
So
you wouldn't. Why would you?
Yeah.
And a lot of websites rightly should make essential ones pre-ticked and not toggleable, because like you say, if you toggle them, you're not going to see the website properly. And arguably the essential GDPR and rights would suggest that if you've consented to essential, you're not letting someone market to you, you're not letting someone use your data, you're not letting someone do anything untoward other than just show you the website. But again, someone might think, through lack of clarity, what's happening when I tick essential? Why would I tick essential cookies? If I don't really know what's going to happen. So it's like you said, it's education, isn't it?
I think completely, and if someone opts out of or if someone wants to opt out of the essential cookies, even that sentence to say, like, you literally won't be able to see the site if you do that, then that kind of negates that issue, doesn't it?
It's talking to someone
people will just click
friendly,
off.
isn't it?
Like,
they will.
There'll be another site that has presented their cookie policy in a more appropriate way,
positive
that doesn't give like that option necessarily, or makes it clearer of what is kind of expected, and then they'll just go there, because if your site just goes blank like it does if you don't opt into them,
no videos load usually, or you lose maps.
Some pages literally say, like, you can't view this content.
No.
And then you just click off, don't you, and head to the next one.
Yeah.
So Depends where you are in your journey in the marketing funnel, but if you're a first-time visitor, then
it all needs to come together in a better way, because I feel like with the 2018 thing and the GDPR, there was a lot of emergency procedures put in, and I feel like these cookie banners came in as a result of that to like, right, let's just get everything legally out on the table. Let's make sure we're abiding by the law, but no one's really had chance yet, and I suppose now we have, because we're 7 or so years on from that point, and now I think it's changing a bit more, and it's for the better, but no one's really had a chance to sit down and sort of say, is this the best way to put this to someone? Or is this just the legal tick box checked, that we're making sure that everyone can have consent of everything and tick everything and use everything, but actually we're not addressing the elephant in the room, if you like, of the fact that people don't really know what they're ticking, and we should be educating them and telling them why we want that information. So I think that's going to happen. That's something we're going to see across the board for social media, for all cookie policies on websites, more serverless stuff. So by serverless, we mean basically something that's not stored on that user's computer or not stored in their browser.
Yeah, which that to me is a bit of a minefield of how that works.
Yeah.
But so it'll be serverless. So like plausible is based on the URL.
Yeah,
is that the best way to describe
so that's probably like how I was describing it earlier. Serverless is it's not on our server, so it's not on the website itself's running on our server. So if somebody stored a cookie, that would get stored in their web browser.
Yeah.
So that would then link with
anywhere
any
else they
tracking,
go.
anything else we've got.
Yeah.
So what the movement is trying to do is basically store that information on the server of the tracking system. So say it's Google, they'll store that. They won't put it into the user's computer or user's web browser.
It'll once you exit that site, that information stays with the server.
Yeah, it does, but it
doesn't follow the user.
No, exactly that.
Yeah, okay.
So it's being very careful with, but again, the user might think, but if I can't see it and it's on someone else's server, what's it doing and how much are they? There's still that fear of if it's not clear, people are still not going to be, their mind's not going to be put at ease to say, okay, well, you're doing it server side, and I'm happy with that. Because again, if you don't educate them to say, this is the benefit of us doing this, we're trying to help you, we're trying not to store cookies, we're trying not to follow you.
I'm trying not to follow you.
Yeah, well, essentially that's what you're doing with a cookie
stalking,
is you're following people, and they used to have a real fear of like remarketing, thinking, why am I saying that? And
oh my god, I get the remarketing on social media is like, I think I talked about it in my last episode on the podcast with the dongle. I bought it, plot twist, but and I still have so many ads for it even though I bought it. And I'm like, I'm not going to buy another one. Like,
but it doesn't know. That's the thing, does it? It doesn't.
I didn't actually buy it through TikTok in
No.
the end. I thought Amazon, at least I could return it easily then.
So you've then stored a cookie from Amazon in your history?
No, I think so. I saw the TikTok. An ad just came up, and I must have clicked on it to see the product on TikTok Shop, I think. And then since then, every ad in my feed is, oh, you buy a brand new car and it doesn't have wireless Apple CarPlay. And so then I thought, oh yeah, I need that because the wire's a bit annoying. So I went on Amazon and bought one. But TikTok obviously hasn't realised they've bought one.
No, because it's still got the cookie. You've shown interest in it, and that's what's triggering the ad.
Yeah.
And it's just constantly hammering. And that's another good point. There's a flaw to remarketing, which we've seen, that once you commit and buy, it doesn't always pass that information across correctly
off the list.
Yeah. So you will constantly be remarketed to for things that are wasting the company's money to send you the ads, and also things that you're not interested in. I may even annoy you.
Yeah.
You may even go the other way with the product and think, actually, this is really irritating. I've already bought the product.
Yeah, I'm not quite there yet, but soon, maybe next podcast episode.
Yeah, not quite there, but yeah. So with that, so then we need to address sort of like the ability to withdraw consent and the ability to understand where your data's stored. So like you say, for that, so there needs to be a clear policy there. So if you think, right, why am I being marketed to this? You can go somewhere, you can see why that's happening, and withdraw your consent, and that should stop happening. That's essentially what we're trying to get to in 2025 with consent, is that people know why things are being shown to them, why they've got something coming up in their feed for something they've bought because they've done it, and the ability to trace it back, source it, and withdraw consent from it.
Yeah.
And then obviously, like you said, there's this whole fear of people that think the phones are listening into them or your computer's listening to you. And obviously there is an element of that, because I've seen it myself. Like if you've got an app open, and you say things, it's undoubtedly then serving me results for things I've said. There's absolutely nowhere else I've mentioned or done that within, say, a week.
How does that work, though?
That is where the grey
confusing.
area of consent applies, because obviously, like we said earlier, say you've got an account on something, you've got an account on Facebook, you've got an account on Amazon, then there's that ability there for that account to kind of utilise the software in the phone to help you do searches and help. But if it's personal to your account, again, this is where they're trying to clear up the grey areas, because there is a bit of a grey area there to kind of allow that software to, if you haven't blocked it or told it you don't want to do it, allow that software to kind of flexibly think, well, you've kind of utilised our voice search inadvertently and we've heard something and this is what we think is relevant to you.
That's mad.
It's then where that data goes though, isn't it? And again, that comes back to transparency. You would like to think that that's only going to stay within that app. But when you start seeing it on other apps, you start questioning, where's that been shared and why has that been shared and why am I now seeing that advert on Facebook? It's something I've just spoken about and Alexa's heard me, or I asked Alexa earlier, or...
I've never noticed that, because in my head it was just something I've never thought about before. Then I've thought about it, I've seen an ad and it's just coincidence.
Yeah, I thought it was that initially, but it's happened so many times to me and it's been so frequently close to when I've said something.
That's
weird. There is something else that's...
Oh God, well, now the whole podcast is going to be about the fact that Alexa's listening to us.
Yeah, no, again, like you say, with the fear-mongering, I don't think it's quite as sinister as that, but I think there is an element of clarity needed for how that app uses the information and when it has the ability to listen to you and when it doesn't and things like that. And I think again there's a way of blowing that way out of proportion, but I think there'll be instances where you just need to be clear with the consumer as to exactly what's going on and where that's being used. And I think again that's the efforts that are being made now to try and have that pro transparency model on all consent. So if that does come in and it goes a step further, and we're already losing cookies and things like that, so all these companies and these softwares are going to have to adapt, I think, and just come up with very transparent. And I mean, we're used to seeing all these terms and conditions that no one reads, so whether they can get away with
write a passage now to say tick the tick box and then just press submit. Yeah, that's going to come back to bite us, like that episode of Black Mirror.
Yeah. There's a lot of Black Mirror that comes true.
Yeah.
It's worryingly accurate.
What episode was that? Joan is awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, it's making sure that transparency is there from the get-go. But I think when you put a load of text in front of somebody, if there is something quite significant about how the data is going to be used or moved or changed or shared, I don't think that's something that people are going to appreciate as being hidden in very small print. I think it's something that, again, if in the efforts of being transparent, we should be putting quite as a high priority.
Yep. Agreed. And plainly.
Yes, impact on ads then. What do we think the future of ads is going to look like in terms of tracking and how the changes in cookies and what we've discussed about transparency? How does that reflect in ads?
It's difficult to say, I guess. In terms of Google ads and remarketing on there, it's not going to be too different. I guess if you've got a cookie-free analytics running, you can pull that data in. I guess in terms of like Facebook though, where it's like a pixel based, I don't know. TBC, I guess.
Yeah, I mean Facebook has the advantage, doesn't it? Because like we said earlier, where there's an account based logic. So do we think things will have to go more account based so that people can get that
potentially
ability to kind of reference what it is that company's taking from them, what it is they're using from them, and if that is the case, if things do go account based, how is that going to, what knock-on effect is that going to have for new systems and new companies that don't yet have them as customers to then try and serve an ad or serve a... I can see that being quite
because you'd be... I mean, potentially you could just be relying on social interaction, like what a user reacts with on social media and not website engagement.
Exactly. So then they're going to have to go to systems like Meta, like Amazon.
Yeah.
And these third parties are going to almost have to ask if they can see and borrow information from customers in order to try and sell them their products. I
mean, I feel like that would be a hard no from a user point of view.
It would.
Because as soon as someone thinks, oh, Meta's going to use that data, I think that's so scary from a user point of view. Because the uncertainties and also what's already happened, people will just think, oh, I'm not letting that happen.
No, I agree.
Be part of the next data leak that probably might happen.
Well, yeah, they're just going to think, what's the benefit to them, aren't they? The bottom line is, can we allow third parties to use your information to kind of sell relevant products to you?
Yeah.
Well, what's in it for me? I think.
Yeah.
But
I feel like it's in the
phrasing.
phrasing. If you're saying, to sell relevant products to you, that already puts you on the back foot as a company, or as a product, but like you're trying to sell something or a service, that puts you on the back foot because the users already think, I don't want to be sold to.
I know.
But it's how you phrase that.
That's the caveat. But then if you're trying to phrase it honestly and transparently, and there's no specific system or company because they need to get that data from those sources, then they would have to put it to you in that way. The alternative would be that these companies would just have to do the old approach, like we've said before, and try and do the wider net catchment and send these ads out again based on location or they'd have to try and do it on different parameters. But really it's trying to work out how can we get our ads seen by people that are at least in the category of demographic that we want to approach. And I suppose then it could end up going back to more general demographics and less about individuals. Because we're saying, remarketing is an individual thing. It's your cookie, it's your event, you've done that, you've shown interest, they're chasing you. But in order to do the demographic thing, they'd have to get, what kind of interest have you got? What's your purchase patterns on Amazon? What kind of stuff do you do on Facebook? They'd have to get some other form of information
way to handle that as well,
to be able to target you.
Yeah, that's a lot though to piece together.
It is a lot. And then those systems would have to make that clear to you that we share this with.
Yeah,
and like you say,
and people
who's going to want to share
don't like that. Yeah,
no.
that is a scary thought though, if you think about it. Like different programmers sharing data, because that clears the view up for a lot of people or paints a stronger picture of a user, even though you don't know specifically who they are. Blah blah blah. But yeah, it's going to make users a bit more wary.
It will, and I think that's what we've understood, and that's the trend we're seeing, is that people are more wary now.
Yeah, completely.
And as I say, 2025 onwards, which is what this kind of podcast is trying to seek to outline, is where is it at today? Where's consent now?
Yeah,
I think that
it's at that weird limbo, isn't it, right now? Anyway,
it is, but there's a lot of stuff changing to be more transparent and more clearer on where things are being used. And I think with the introduction of AI that we were saying earlier, so using tools like ChatGPT, linking that in with softwares, having AI search, it's then where are my search histories being shared and who's seeing what I've searched for, and what's ChatGPT doing with my search history and my data. And obviously we said earlier, the more premium plans and the plus plans, there's more transparency there already with ChatGPT saying where they share that and how they train the models.
And even because it even says about in shared workspaces. So we've got a shared plan, but your individual workspace is still never shared across that, is it? So
that's right. And it's locked down. So our plus model plan that we're part of doesn't go towards training the ChatGPT AI model, which is good and bad, because part of you thinks, well, overall for the world it's better that it learns off things that I've corrected it with.
But then also you could spin it the other way and think, as a user, I don't want to be working the same way everyone else is. You might work differently.
Yeah, you might do, and it depends. That is a problem we won't know about until it happens, because it's further down the line of how it's being trained, how that affects the results.
It is scary though. Like the other day, if you've got one of the pay plans, you can input characteristics. And it asks you that little short survey, and now it's email. It's giving me not emails, but it's giving me responses in the way I'd write an email, with exclamation marks, smiley faces, and I'm like, oh my god, it knows, which is creepy. It's not obviously it doesn't know, but it knows that I write in a friendly tone, and I like to write like cleverer.
That. Yeah,
but I don't really use it for. I would never lift something out of it to send, because it's just, why can't it hack Americanisms?
It's just built by too much hard code from America. It can't let it go. No,
literally though, it can do everything, but it can't swap a Z for an S. No. And it's so easy to spot when you see that. But that's a whole other episode.
It does trip up on that. Mine's actually lately has been fine with it, but it just seems to become random as to whether it produces Americanisms or not. It's so much about what you feed into it, as we said before, and we know that. But it's now becoming more and more intelligent in terms of telling you what it's thinking when it's thinking it before it gives you the answer, and you can interject it in the thinking phase. And I've been testing the newer models with it, and that's pretty crazy. So before it just runs and gives you an answer,
whereas now you can
to say, is this actually what you're asking me? And have you considered this, and have you thought about that? And you can go through those basic things. Right, now I'll give you an educated answer.
Is that an energy saving thing?
Partly, but it's also partly about getting you the right answer, because I think there's so much Which, yeah, you could argue it is, because there's so much energy used. I think Paul told me the other day it's something like 2,000 watts per search, which people don't even think about.
2,000 jazz watts.
A lot, yeah. Yeah, 2,000 jazz watts. But that's a lot of power per search globally on a mass scale.
I can't quantify in my head what that is.
Well, a kettle's like 2.5, 3. So it's almost like boiling a kettle every time you're asking, or flicking the kettle on every time you're asking.
Yeah, but wait, 200 watts for... okay.
Yeah, 2,000, Paul said on average. But again, more complex tasks probably use more. Yeah. Simpler tasks use less.
And then when you can put documents and everything in as well, it makes it even more confusing.
And when it has to draw things and create, so on a global scale, if you're creating the wrong answers, or people are getting the wrong thing, then that would be a good interjection to save the environment. But I think it's creating that data, it's knowing where that's going and where that's being stored from a consent point of view. It's being really clear, and it's not just ChatGPT, that's just where it stems, but it's your search, which is now using AI to search, and you've got Bing, which is coming out, which is more pro AI search and syncing more with ChatGPT. So it's not just Google anymore that affects how that pans out. There's also other systems out there that are trying to up their game.
Yeah.
And obviously it's just knowing, well, I've just performed that search. What AI systems now have that access to that search information, and who can see what I've searched? And I think that's where it could end up having to be very clear for people in advance what it is you're doing and where your data is being used. But like I say, when you've got an account level, it's much easier because you manage those settings and that data in the account, and everyone's clear on what's going on. But when it's a web browser or something that you're signed out of, or something you're involuntarily opting into or accidentally clicked on, or I think that's where it becomes harder, and that's probably more in the website at the moment than it is anything else, because there's certain, when you're visiting websites, you're usually not signed in, you're not a member of that website, so that consent is then very much assumed until they ask you.
True.
So it's just, I guess it's just enhancing that. But in terms of sort of giving advice for marketers, I suppose, that are in that position, what would you say that people should look for?
I mean, starting the move now over to a cookie-free system, I just think it's going to boost your visibility now anyway, within reason. So, shifting to something like Plausible. It doesn't have to be Plausible. That's just the one we use. But there are other systems out there.
Yeah, Fathom's good. We've used that as well. Fathom's another one,
It's a nice word, isn't it? Fathom.
It is.
Okay. And then, I just feel like by the time, if you start making that shift now, it's going to make that whole process more seamless for you. Because, it's kind of inevitable that your GA4 is just not going to be helping you in the future as much. So, and then where you do have your kind of, marketing policies, etc., just being really transparent and clear cut and in a user friendly tone. So you don't want to be using jargon. People aren't going to understand. They're just going to opt out because they're confused by what you're saying.
Great.
And making that really palatable, like literal bullet point information. Don't give them a whole paragraph. No. They're not going to read it. Like, we know that.
Transparency is key, isn't it? I think it's trying to avoid too much technical speak and assume, like we said earlier, assuming people know what essential cookies are. They think they just want to know why do I need to accept them? Why do you need them off me? What am I consenting to? If it was a simple passage about, in order to benefit and see this website correctly, which in fairness is how a lot of the cookie policies will write them. But it's just being clear with that person to say, if you want to experience the website correctly, that's the purpose of these. It just happens to be that now by law we want to run this by you to be polite and to check with you that you're okay to do it. Essentially is what it boils down to. And less about trying to actually get something from it or steal information from you. It's just about being transparent to say, look, these cookies do exist and their purpose is functional.
But they're not going to follow you about.
They're not going to follow you about, but it's how you word that. Okay, so anything else in terms of advice?
Like we said earlier about clear opt-ins, I guess. And I guess that kind of comes with being transparent, but where you do have options for people to opt into newsletters, etc., being really clear about what they're getting. And then I think that's it for me.
In terms of the tracking funnel, using like you're doing now, Plausible, you feel like that's going to be sufficient enough to feed back to clients to give them enough information without cookies?
Yes and no. I mean, it depends what you're doing. If you're running paid ads, you get a certain level of visibility just by that, without worrying about your cookie policy anyway.
Yeah.
Because you get the click information, you get the impressions. That's all sorted separately anyway. But I guess, yeah, once you get on site, systems like Plausible currently only give you certain tracking metrics, or like you can only set up certain custom tracking, which currently is button clicks. So if you do need that visibility for form submits, etc., that are coming through, so that you can sync that with your ads and Facebook ads, etc., to kind of calculate that return on investment, that could be a bit more difficult, I guess, because a button click won't necessarily translate to a form submit, a phone call, an email.
No, exactly. So creating that funnel for that
Yeah.
customer, it's slightly harder. But what you're saying is, anyway, even when you had the cookies, the data was so inaccurate.
Yeah, well, it's two extremes really. It's Google, where you had, if people were opting out, you had nothing, and then Plausible, that's tracking every button click for a form submit. So you potentially are getting 5 clicks from one user who hasn't filled out the correct
Or one that's a bit
fields.
handsy and clicks the
One
button
a bit
few
handsy,
times.
no, completely.
And then
One
you
that
think,
just
oh, great, we
literally,
have 5 buttons clicked. And you think, actually, no, that person's just clicked. Or,
Yeah.
on your mobile, you click it and it doesn't load. You click it again and again and again, and you start pressing it.
Yeah.
Before you know it, you've got 10 tracks there
Yeah.
of submissions, and you're trying to offset that with the actual submissions that have come in.
Yeah.
And you've only had one form submitted. So you think, oh, hold on, this data's...
Yeah,
it's
I think
things
that's,
like
I
that.
guess, where you can compare it, because it splits it for you by like total count and then total users.
Yeah.
So you can kind of measure that disparity. But then also, I guess you'd have to compare that to your data,
You would.
because you've got the forms submissions. So comparing that too. And then if there is that huge discrepancy between that figure and your actual form submits in your inbox, maybe you need to be looking at that process anyway. But
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's something I think people don't often think enough
yeah.
about. In terms of ads, do you think the consent's going to affect the ads themselves?
Remarketing, definitely. Ads on, I don't know, I guess awareness ads, would it really affect it? I don't know.
Could do. It depends which direction it goes. But in terms of
Yeah.
tracking the ads are going to have to
Yeah.
eventually going to have to conform to this process
Yeah.
as well, of being very clear with somebody about how they're tracking the
Yeah.
engagement, the clicks, where they're being shown, to provide the metrics to
True.
marketers like yourselves. So that's going to have to be clearer. So that could have a knock-on effect, couldn't it, with
Yeah.
how you're tracking, how you're providing data for
Yeah,
them.
that's true. Because even like being on a Google page, so like a Google search page, they're obviously tracking you to know you've scrolled past it 8
Yeah.
times to generate 8 impressions.
Yeah,
So, yeah, when's
exactly.
that
And
going
then your search that was organic is then producing ads,
Yeah.
and it's how they then use that search from an ad point of view. It's got to be very careful with that. Again, if you're logged in as a Google account, I think that gives them a lot more flexibility
Yeah.
and freedom to kind of attach those behaviours
Yeah,
to
and it
your
starts
account.
to prioritize the things that you often engage with.
It does.
Anyway, it learns
Yeah.
more about you. And even like in terms of ad copy, like if you wrote 100, well, not 100, but like 15 headlines in Google, Google starts to know what your user engages with and prioritizes that headline that company have said that you'll probably engage with most.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
that's a good point.
difficult one.
Yeah,
I guess
okay.
that's all to be confirmed.
Okay, so that's really good advice for sort of more digital and online kind of marketers, and the kind of best practice moving forwards. Is there anything we should consider for offline, or for things like direct mail? How should people approach that, and should there be any considerations for sort of anything else offline that might be taken for granted marketing wise?
Yeah, I don't know how it'll go with like blanket door drops. If we have to consider consent in that, that's a different thing. But I guess that's on a data basis, like where you're getting your data from. As long as they've got permission, I think that kind of works.
I guess it's just the size of the business and the intent, a bit like we
Yeah.
get online, is the marketing intent. There's the old-fashioned cold calling and junk
Yeah.
mail kind of approach where you're throwing something through. But if you're trying to keep that customer retention up, or
Yeah.
you're trying to give them more quality, ongoing direct mail, like you would with a newsletter,
Yeah.
then I think, there's definitely a benefit to having that consent, because
Yeah.
it's just one thing.
You've got the
again, that
option then.
you've got the option, but again, like we said earlier, do people really want to receive things that they haven't asked for? And is there any real logic to that? So if someone's actually saying, actually, I would like to see that, or then it's arguably could be much more worthwhile for both sides. And much more efficient.
So. If you're getting someone to sign up to a newsletter on your site, no harm having that like print opt-in, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's
probably
a relatively easy one, because you can then upsell to somebody and say, if that's really the correct phrase of using it, but you can then kind of encourage somebody to opt into more things at the point of them showing interest in the previous thing, because you think, actually, well, if you're interested in that, you might be whereas somebody that's not interested in anything, to then tell them to ask. A lot
can
of
I send this to your house? Can you give me your
to
address?
ask you to tick a lot of boxes. It's a big thing for someone that's shown no interest in anything yet.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, it might come to that stage of, am I allowed to send this to your house? Are you okay with us sending you?
Well, yeah. How come we can't remarket to people online, but we can turn up at someone's door?
It's a bit crazy. Yeah, there's some definitely things that need to be ironed out there with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can ask somebody to buy something by turning up, but you can't. Yeah, online. I agree. I guess there's a lot more effort involved and more personal interaction with turning up than bombarding someone.
It's going to take you a lot longer, but
flinging 100,000 of the same thing at people is probably a lot simpler.
Yeah. But then where's the quality? Question to be confirmed, I guess.
Well, yeah, we know that generally there isn't. They just do a catch-all approach, don't they? They bombard and.
Depends. It depends on your approach, I guess.
Even today, you're still getting loads of junk mail and getting loads of people, and with bots and things trying to approach you, getting loads of deceptive emails and loads of people just trying their luck. And really, it's very hard to stop it if people are clicking and engaging in something, to trace where that's come from, and then actually, once the action's been engaged, or if it's a scam or a deception, once it's been, undertaken, how you undo that is it's a lot of work at that point. So yeah, I think that's the take-home message, though, isn't it? In terms of what people can do, is just encouraging, transparency, best practices, using systems that don't use cookies,
and staying up to date. I think is a crucial one. People are getting
keeping
fined.
An eye on where things are going. Yeah, people are getting fined quite a lot. Meta for one.
Yeah. And what was the other one? The
the ICA, which of all people you wouldn't have thought the people you usually go to trust.
Yep.
Both of them have been fined for incorrect
data use,
which is not very encouraging.
I mean, it can even come down to, on a small scale level, if you had an email list of 1,000 people,
that's right.
It only takes one person to opt out and you not to take them off that list, or not to, depends how you're managing it, but if you email that person and they said, actually, you know what, I've already unsubscribed, they're that person that reports you, that's it. You can't argue that.
That is all it takes. Yeah, you're right. And people get complacent and they think, well, I've had these people on the list for X amount of time, and you've grown as a business, you keep them and you use them, or someone else passes them across. That's all it can take, and then you've made a massive oversight on checking whether people actually want you to contact them.
And I mean, a lot of the time, once you've got someone's consent, that's great, you've got them until they opt out. But if you've written into your clause that after X amount of years you'll take them off the list if you've had no engagement from them, then you need to honour that. That's the other thing. So it could be you've got someone still on your list a year after you said you'd take them off. And if they then think, oh, hold on, I thought that said I wouldn't be on the list anymore, then same again.
The assumption is the massive mistake. But I think a lot of the tools out there and the softwares, the MailChimps, Klaviyo's that we use to market, social medias, they're all going to have to conform to being on top of this practice to kind of stay relevant and to make sure that they don't get caught out. So I think there's, it's not so much of a massive panic of telling everyone you've got to keep finding out what the latest thing is and keep up to date, because I think these systems will have to keep doing that for you.
Yeah, that's so true.
It's just being aware and making sure that you know where you stand with each thing you're using and each thing you're interacting with, to understand how it's using your data and where your data may or may not be misused, I suppose. But do we think, so in terms of what we said about the UK, do we think the UK is going to be more strict with this than, say,
probably
the EU? I mean, it already is more strict than America. It's far more strict. But with the EU and the whole terms of leaving EU, do we think the UK is going to go more stringent
I
with
think,
this?
it would be more keen to protect users. So, technically speaking, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's
going
a lot
to be swings and roundabouts. I think there's going to be some things we're more lenient on and other things that we're stricter on.
Without going into politics, obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty in the world as well. So each country is trying to become a lot more concerned about itself. And I think if we open the doors for certain systems or softwares that maybe were a little bit more lenient before to leak information overseas or to go into EU companies, EU systems, I think that would create a lot more problems for the kind of central management for the UK. So I think we're definitely going to see a pattern where, you know, in this country, I think we're going to be as strict, if not stricter, as we've been before.
How does that work then for businesses operating in multiple countries?
It's difficult.
Because I was going to say they have to have multiple policies.
If that comes down to circumstance and the type of business and the type of collateral that you're kind of creating for them, the media that they're using. But generally there'd be a headquarters somewhere. But if you're operating in those countries, your presence and your marketing in that country has to abide by the law in that country. So you'd have a lot more on your plate than you would if you were just in one. But saying that, say if the UK is more stringent, as long as you've got the worst case scenario, you could then roll that out across all the other countries and know that you've covered. Your worst case is covered.
Yeah, that's true.
Similarly with clients, you know, like we work with, what need help with things like privacy policies, terms and conditions.
Yeah.
So the legality side of the website, in terms of what it's doing and what their company's offering, and certainly if they're e-commerce, we would make sure that we're using a service that's very UK focused and that keeps it up to date. Because if the law changes and your policy is out of date, then your policy is no longer valid. Yeah. And with things like this, stuff's changing so fast, we need to make sure that we provide services for clients that have those updated.
Yeah, completely. Okay.
So that could be a case of not just having it written once, but actually using something that's, you know, overseeing it basically.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just gives you that peace of mind, I guess, as a business owner.
So as a kind of sum up from what we've said already, in terms of we've done the, you know, what you would advise in terms of sorting yourself out for 2025 consent-wise, really. But in terms of kind of best practice, or what we'd say the focus is, what would you say to that? So in terms of someone came to us and said, I'm looking to do digital marketing, but I'm concerned about consent, what would the focus be for somebody to look at?
Good question.
I would probably say it's the summarising what we've said, but it's the focus would be shifting to things that are all consensual. So all the advertising that company or that business is rolling out should trying to be looking at and focusing on how they can make that more consensual. Yeah. So making sure that the advertising is not just blanket approach. It's not just rolled out to demographics. It's actually more user first of can we get in front of the user and check with them and make sure that they're happy with that. Any kind of system, software, social media platform, anything that's out there at the moment that's kind of trying to encourage that, I would say stay on top of that. Yeah. And be at the front of it before everyone jumps on it, because once everyone jumps on it, it's going to be, you know, you're going to be behind the curve. So I think as advice that I'd say that rather than the less pivotal advertising where you could apply more blanket approaches. You could do based on demographics, you could do it based on like a gender or an age. I think now it needs to be much more about honesty and transparent advertising. So if you can try and embrace those new...
Yeah, make that your USP. Head of the curve.
Exactly. Yeah, messaging, embracing the softwares out there that are using that already. I think that's a really good kind of way to start.
I mean, that even comes back to AI. So many people now want to know how businesses are using AI as part of to streamline or make it more effective for clients or customers. Yeah. So yeah, I think just being transparent in every aspect that you can be, there's no harm in that, because someone no doubt will have the question in their mind.
Yeah, agreed. And keeping safe, you know, in terms of advice, keeping safe means of communication active and relevant. So emails are still really effective and still a really good way to do it. But again, just making sure the people you're emailing have consented, you've done it properly. So as a company, you're being very transparent, but it's still a great way to communicate.
Yeah, and you can be really granular. I think that's the other thing. Like, depending on what you know about that person, through whatever data you've collected, you can really narrow down. So it could be really...
Yeah, really, and that's only beneficial to that person, really, because they only really want messaging. They
don't want content relevant to them.
So as long as they're transparent and they know that, again, creating accounts and signing up to things and making purchases, immediately you can purchases are probably another topic entirely, but you can't assume someone has an account when they make a purchase, because if they have that assumed account without volunteering it, then essentially you've then got that ability to kind of get information from them with that account that they haven't actually consented to. So again, you want to make sure that, but if they do consent and you do get the account, that's another avenue of potential behavior that you can get from them, relevant marketing, etc., that you can do for them, and then create like loyalty programs, so ongoing. If it was a customer or somebody that bought from you before, you could create that ongoing loyalty program, but not do it in a hard marketing sell. Do it in a very transparent, honest way that, we've seen you've done this, you this was your pattern, you didn't really like this, so how about trying this? Being very frank with them.
That's nice.
And trying to give them a reason to kind of keep in that loop, I think. So I think that would be my kind of key points, would be don't change too much what you're doing, but just put some of those tried and tested methods still.
I mean, it has to translate into, whilst being compliant, you need to still be doing things that are working for your client base. And no one knows that base probably better than you, depending on who you are.
Especially if you've got the core metrics of your customer base and the evidence there. I think it's making sure that you're on top of, like we said before, on top of the transparency and the consent being, as you're moving forward, your priority for any marketing that you're going to do. Make sure that that's covered. So any sort of rough predictions for the next 5 years of where data protection might be going, or consent?
It's gonna, I think it's only going to get tighter. In terms of GDPR,
it seems to be a very safe assumption.
And then I mean, in terms of consent and tracking, I just feel like if businesses are going to be encouraged to be more transparent, essentially, people are users, therefore, or businesses, whoever the customer in your eyes is, are going to favour that. So I think that's kind of where it's going to go, and people are just going to become more aware. All these changes are kind of causing conversation, so people are only going to be more interested in how you're handling it. So
that's true. There could be a very positive spin on it, that people are more connected to their customers, they're more aware of what they're doing, and the customers more aware of what the business is doing, and as a result there's a stronger relationship, stronger bond there.
Even though it could make your remarketing list smaller, or your email list smaller, but they're more quality because they're actively wanting to be there. I
think that's definitely going to be a trend. It's going to be smaller lists but more quality, more opted-in leads, again, more useful information rather than ambiguous, like you were saying with clicks or views, or you're going to get more in-depth data as a result of having to be more stringent to get it.
True.
So I think that's only going to be a positive thing. And then, like, for example, with web browsers, you're seeing more and more brands and browsers popping up now, different types of software browsers that are trying to discourage involuntary ads, trying to clear ads out the way, trying to stop people having any reference and store to cookies, basically trying to put people's interests and privacy first. So I think if that's the direction they're going, I think other things are going to follow suit, because like I say, the web is probably one of the most vulnerable, because you can do things without being signed in, without having an account. So they have to be very careful about what you take from somebody when technically they've given you no actual consent. It's all inferred, it's all implied, it's not actually been taken. So I think that's a good assumption. I think that's what would happen. So we've basically said people are going to be more close to their clients and to their customers. The marketing could potentially be better for that, and systems, softwares and platforms are going to get probably more tight and stricter on cookie regulations and privacy and how data is managed. I think that's a fair assumption. So I think we've covered most things that we wanted to cover on the podcast. Probably the only one thing we haven't touched on, which isn't massively significant in what we're trying to get across, because we're trying to highlight the reasoning behind it, but it's also the negative side of not doing this. So what could happen? So it's usually hit with very hefty fines, and certainly the bigger companies, which is generally why this was rolled out in the first place. But you're talking sort of millions, not thousands, not hundreds. It's millions in the terms of how serious I think this needs to be taken, because the whole movement is going to be global. But as I say, there's more severity in the EU and the UK than there is in other countries still today. But it's just how seriously this needs to be taken, because I think that gives us some indication that, everything is going to move in this direction.
Yeah.
Otherwise the fines would be, a lot less harsh.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it goes to show, doesn't it, just how severe people take not using data correctly.
Yeah, I think it's a very big, I read a few months ago, it's more valuable than gold by quite some way. So it's a big,
Isn't that mad?
A very big resource that people can tap into if they're not careful. And a lot of people say, well, why am I worried about people seeing what I do? I've got nothing to hide. Or why? It's not so much about
which is what I think a lot of the time.
Yeah, I agree. But it's not about hiding things.
Not.
It's not about people unveiling your private behavior. It's about how valuable that behavior is to that company, and why should they be able to
they should buy your lot of data.
Exactly, monopolize on your data without you having a say of it. I think that's what it's more about.
Yeah.
It's not about people finding things out about you that aren't. I think that's a bit of a
that's a bit
like you said
American
earlier.
movie.
Yeah, it is. It's very fear mongering a bit. You kind of got the wrong end of the stick with that, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, hopefully this podcast has been useful in terms of highlighting elements of consent and where it's going, where it's been. But yeah, if there's anything that's still that you've got questions about or you're still unsure about, just drop us a line. I'm sure we can. We can help.
Or if you've got any more podcast topics you want to hear, we've got a list. We'll add it to the list.
We've got quite a comprehensive list, but yeah, we're always looking out for more.
Yeah, completely.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.